And this is fun. And your editing is making us look real good, so keep that up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, you gave me some pushback. I told you to put that one quote up there, and you said, "Oh, Google it, Jesse." Just,
Yeah.
but fine, Joe. Yeah, after editing, a few different conversations now, I'm like, man, you just never know where the gold's gonna, show up. So hit record first.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, it's great. It's crazy. I was having a conversation with another buddy, and it's a similar kind of idea where you just start talking, and all of a sudden you're like, "Wait a minute, what did I say? That was really good."
Oh yeah, of course you're gonna say that about yourself. Oh man, I sounded so good as I
No, no,
said
no,
that. I
no.
formulated that
He'll
very
say
well.
something, I say something, and we go back and forth. Come on. Yeah, but it's funny when you're like, I believe in synergy, which, if you know that word from my favorite hemisphere, the friendly environment, one plus one equals three, in that world. And when two people come together that are passionate, looking to improve, iron sharpens iron, and you're made with a better result by just through the conversation. So
Yeah.
The scripture that comes to mind is that, one will put 1,000 to flight, but two will put 10,000 to flight. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents Channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode, my friend Joe and I are discussing government and insurance and legacy and so many fun things. It's all about how you can have more control and profitability over the banking function in your life. But we just have a great quality conversation around life, and I hope that you enjoy.
I was thinking today about the river that I run next to, and I'm watching this kayaker off in the distance come towards me, and he has the wind at his back, so tailwind. He has he's going with the current, and he's paddling. So, given the amount of effort that he's putting into the activity of kayaking and the paddling, he's moving disproportionately further than someone in with no current, no wind, and
Yep.
absolutely like infinitely further than somebody going against current, against wind.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's another way of explaining the airplane example within becoming your own banker. When you're creating the environment where, if you want to go the direction that is downstream, it's so much easier. It's frictionless to get there. You get there rejuvenated. You get there stress free. You get there faster than you expected to. Um, and yet the rate at which you're paddling does not change compared to the other way. So that was an interesting, like a little bit of a not a revelation or epiphany, but just another way of explaining the same idea over and over.
Yeah,
Um,
some quotes toying at my mind. Is it Sun Tzu or something? Maybe that. No, maybe not Sun Tzu. Maybe, but maybe Miyashi. Who was another famous samurai warrior? Anyway, something about when you understand something deeply, you see it broadly. All right. So here's what I want to know in today's conversation. Is that the direction that we're going in? We're going to be talking about the airplane example. Is that getting tied into the American dream? You and I have kind of been texting back and forth about that. I mean, I'm ready for any of it, all of it. What are you
yeah,
thinking?
yeah, the American dream. Oh man, we could go that route. There's the CD sisters. There's the airplane example. We haven't touched on the grocery store example. We haven't touched. There's so many, like.
There are. Okay. Well, so let's have a quick talk about the American dream, just because we have been texting back and forth a little bit about it. You'd mentioned it from a book that you've been reading. It's been something that's been on my mind for some time right now, and I've kind of been just anticipating putting out a general episode of sharing my thoughts, but a conversation around the subject I think would be a lot of fun for everybody, me, you, everybody, because my perspective is that the American dream is live and well and maybe better than ever. Not that there aren't a lot of foes out there, a lot of snakes and dragons, to use Nelson's language, but as as good as it's ever been, if not better. Um, but also, let me go ahead and say that from our last conversation, I certainly as well think that you could go deeper on the CD sisters example. I don't believe that we exhausted that. I'll be honest with you. I've not finished that editing from our last conversation as of today. So I don't think that that was exhausted either. So we can certainly go there, but just because you've already talked about that paddler that you saw on the river, okay? And he had the benefit of his own efforts. He had the tide or the current that's going with him, current, not tide, the current that's going with him, and then the wind at his back as well. You know, I would have seen that probably and thought of the airplane example as well. And I feel that the snakes and the dragons that are out there in the wide world, the battles and the foes that we have to confront financially to accomplish the American dream, they're very real, they're very present, but also there are these currents, there are these tailwinds, etc., that we could put in our favor of creating an advantageous financial environment for ourselves to facilitate the American dream. So, what are your thoughts at surface level, Joe? Is the American dream alive and well? Is it possible? What are your thoughts about it?
I think it's absolutely possible, more than possible. I think if you take this approach, you can't not end up on top in the American dream. And that dream is whatever you get to define that. In terms of this book, Becoming Your Own Banker, it's all about giving you control. You create the definition of success, whether that's you need a huge real estate portfolio or multiple businesses and a certain cash flow expectation to live a lifestyle, whether that's time freedom, whether that's maintaining the same level of lifestyle and completely removing stress, increasing certainty, removing stress out of your life. Um, Absolutely, you could do that. Now, can you do that in a traditional financial planning sense? I don't know. I don't. You know, the adage is like if you have to you buy and hold for a long time. That's what financial planning kind of relies on. Buy, they'll say the 60/40 portfolio or the S&P 500 or pick your flavor. Buy it and hold on to it and hope. When I hear that sequencing of words, it does not inspire certainty. Um, you're relying on several external things to go right for you to get what you need to so you can live the way you want at some point in the future. Like you can't even do that now. That's a big eye opener for people. This isn't about just living 50 years from now when you hit retirement age, 40 years, 30 years from now when you hit retirement. It's about being able to live now and in the future. Um, that version of the dream, yeah, I would say it's really challenging to think traditional financial planning can address that. The way they walk through how to approach planning for that, you need to pick a a lifestyle target off in the future. So they have to run it through their calculations of inflation. So they take $1 and make it five in the future. Because if we look backwards, that makes sense. A candy bar today is $1. It costs a nickel 50 years ago, right? So they're just taking that and applying it to the future. So if it costs $1 today, it's probably going to be five in the future. Um, so they do that to your lifestyle expectation, which we don't know. We have no idea what that's going to be, but we're throwing a dart. They're applying an inflation estimation that's throwing the dart, and they're saying, okay, now we have the target. What do we have to do today to hit that target? Well, we're going to take our capital, give it to someone else and something else, some other entity, a mutual fund, who gives it to a mutual fund manager, who gives it to an index and companies, boards of companies to invest it. They all get a cut, and then you get what's remainder. And hopefully that remainder compounds. That not all compounding is the same, compounds to hit that target off in the future. But you can't use it today. That version of the dream is like, that would mean, if you follow that line of thinking, that would mean you have to make so much that whatever you save is inconsequential to your lifestyle. So you could still live and do everything you want today and save, but not even need to look at it for the future. And if you look, the numbers are the numbers. Most of Americans are not in a situation where they can do that, where they have such an overflow of cash flow that setting 20, 30% aside does nothing to their lifestyle. It inhibits no choices in the current. It just, I have not found that to be the average American.
Right.
If I put money in traditional financial planning, if I put money to the future, I cannot spend it today. To me, that changes how I act today. That's not the American dream, not the robust, beautiful American dream that I laid out in the beginning of this, where you could do anything you want today and in the future and enjoy the inheritance with the next generation with them instead of leaving it to them. It's really tough to do that with traditional financial planning.
I love that. So I'm sorry, you made me think about a conversation that I had earlier today. I wasn't trying to cut you off. You made me think about a lady that I was speaking with, and she's at an interesting point in her family dynamics, meaning her grandmother's still alive, but she is also a grandmother herself. Really neat conversation on talking about legacy and building a family banking system and all kinds of cool stuff. And where was I going? She's asking me some questions. No, I'm losing it. What was it? We had such a good conversation, and you said something that made me think about something that she brought up. It'll come to me because it was, I love how you just worded. That's what it was. I love how you just worded about not leaving an inheritance for the next generation, but enjoying an inheritance with the next generations. So this lady was talking to me about, well, if she owned policies on grandchildren, okay, she'd be able to pay premiums. She'd be able to make policy loans. She'd be providing. So we just walked that out. If this lady gets a policy on her grandkids, and they're young now, could she not be using policy loans for taking that family on a vacation with her? Yes, she could. They could literally be today, this year, they could be using a policy, a private banking entity for taking a family vacation or for building up capital for their future wedding or business or home or car or whatever. So they could be using it for things today. They could be using it for things in the nearer future. And then if she's getting a policy on a grandchild of hers, isn't that also leaving a death benefit for her great grandchildren also today? What a beautiful broad range of, embodying what you just said, which I really liked how you worded it, of them enjoying that together, having that access to capital because it's not been locked away now, not having to sacrifice because they're going to want to go on a vacation this year or whatever else. It could be anything. I'm saying vacation because that's a good example, a normal example, right, of what you could use infinite banking for in the here and now. And it's very enjoyable. Everybody could get on board with that, right? So I don't know. You just made me think about that conversation, and I liked how you worded that. Let me ask you a couple of questions, Joe. So what do you think then are some key considerations that folks should notice that'll put them on the track to enjoy the American dream?
Key considerations for people to notice. I think, like, the first thing, to be very honest of where you are. And that is not just, yes, please take inventory of what you have, like your assets, liabilities, income, expenses, definitely on a financial side, but also your understanding, your financial understanding. Are you, and examine those there are formal documents, balance sheet, income statement, they're formal documents. Or people typically call a balance sheet, I'm sorry, an income statement, their budget. Look at those things. How much of your money, you have money coming in, cash coming in, how much of it gets sent to a third party of some sort, a tax, bank, loans, just random expense, Hulu, just expenses. How much of it passes through your family and you never earn another dime, another dollar on that money ever again? So the almost inverse of that beautiful story you just told, where the great grandmother, for the great great grandkids, it's like she spent it. The sequence matters. She spent it, and therefore that dollar is no longer available for her. The growth is no longer available for her. But then the estate, the future value of the state decreases. And that's all the way down. That money is never, ever available. You go far enough into the future, that's an infinite loss. Um, when you start looking at things with, I think that's kind of what Nelson was hinting at, thinking long range like a forester. Think multiple, the repercussions, the second and third order repercussions of your decisions today. Think through those. If I spend this, is it enriching the family? My life, your spouse's wife, your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids? Or is this money like a cheeseburger that's gone forever? You gave somebody else your capital and it's gone. And then go down the list and start to really look at how much of your, like, how much of that do you have a choice with? Some people are W-2 employees. By the time they get money in their bank account, the IRS was paid, like Social Security, FICA, Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff came out.
And then
From
it's
that point on,
direct deposited into a bank too after all that.
yeah. Now, in theory, you're supposed to have, yeah, right. You're supposed to have access to it immediately, but we'll go with that assumption and say from that point on, you have a choice. And every choice is either positively compounding for you and your family and all future generations, or it's negatively compounding against you and all your future generations. And if you start looking at things that way, the long term, you start really second guessing not so much what, like the first instinct is going to be what you spend your money on. You're going to say, "Ooh, I got to buy assets then." Does that mean I can never live my life though? That wasn't Nelson's message. He wasn't saying what you buy first. The first thing you have to examine is how you buy it,
Mm.
right? It's, you know, your money is now in your possession. You can do a couple things with it. If you choose to spend it first, then you're in that negative compound. It's gone. It is what it is. It's gone. Even if that spending is buying an asset, the original dollars are gone. You traded those for the asset. Now, the hope is the asset kind of appreciates and can make up for that. But the original dollars are still gone. You have to reconcile with that opportunity cost is really what it is. And like if you take a step back, it's how you buy, how you finance those things that's more important. You can go to Disney World. You can go on that vacation. You can buy cars. You can do all that now. If you buy it in the right order, if your cash flows in the correct order, you can do that. But here's a question for you, Jesse. If I make X amount and it goes to the IRS, and the next thing it does is go to my retirement plan, and I go on vacation with that money, can I buy a car? Can I go to Disney World?
Not without playing
Can
it
I?
by their rules, paying them back and the interest, and will you access it?
No,
All this stuff.
So you can't spend it on normal expenses to
Right.
enjoy your life.
Right.
It has to be an emergency. Like there's certain things that will allow you to take money out with like a half slap of the wrist, but they'll say, okay, well, we won't penalize you for doing this because it was a hardship withdrawal. But still, you have to beg, make the case, someone has to approve it. There's
Yep.
delays, it gets sent to you, you got to cash the check. Like it's nowhere near as fluid and frictionless as you're made to believe. There's a reason why people say when you put your money in those retirement plans, it's pretty much locked up. It's intended to. That was the design. The IRS said, we'll give you the deduction today. It's essentially a loan. We'll give you a tax loan today. Let it grow in the account, but it's got to stay there until 59 and a half. There's certain other weird rules, like sometimes you can get to it at 55, or there's certain ways you can take it out systematically, like equally over a certain period of time. But generally speaking, they want you to hold it there till 59 and a half. Then you can touch it. Like, wow. People knew you're not allowed to touch it till 59 and a half. And who knows what the rules are going to be when you're 59 and a half.
Especially when you consider that the rule makers make exceptions to their own rules. And
Yeah. How about, oh man, look back. Well, let's just ask the first person that contributed to a 401k, what were the rules he did it, or he or she did it compared to today? What are the
Sure.
rules? Did they
Sure.
not change? Now I know like tax rates went bonkers. I know the rules changed like 1,000 times since then. ERISA came about. There's certain restrictions on if you're a high income earner and like all types of weird stuff started coming out. It's like that's a lot. That's onerous regulation. That's something that adds to complexity. If you have to ask 15 questions to determine if this makes sense for you, I mean, Occam's razor would say the simplest answer is yeah, that's way too complex. I can't follow. I don't know why I can and Jesse can't, or Jesse can and I can't contribute, or Jesse gets to contribute more than me. I don't know why all that is. Um, so just something to consider as you're looking through your balance sheet, as you're looking through where your cash is flowing. Trace the direction of where it's flowing, out of the house or into the house. And what's in the house, your assets, look at that and see, do I have control over this? Can I call them up and say, I need the money now? There's probably some ratio that they'll let you have. Like, for example, a retirement plan will give you what they call a loan. It's really a qualified distribution under they use the word loan, but it's not actually a loan. They give you up to $50,000, right? They'll let you use that. But if you have $1 million account, you can't get your hands on $950,000 of it. Like, well, that's not helpful. You have certain investment type of accounts, like your E-Trade account or something like that. There's a way you can get access to half the value of the account without having to sell the account. This is what Elon Musk did when he bought Twitter and renamed it to X. He leveraged Tesla stock to buy that. So yes, go down your balance sheet. Look at what you have control over. Look at what are the rules for that control. Are they in your favor or are they in some other entity's favor? Look at, then examine your debt. Like everyone talks about asset allocation. What about your debt allocation? Or another way to think of that, like the efficiency of your debt. Okay, I have $100,000 loaned out in 5 different things, but when I pay this 90% of the payment goes to interest. Is that efficient? I don't think so. You're not making any headway. You're going to be paying that for a very long time. So maybe that might be something we want to address. Like you can start, it's kind of funny. The industry deliberately makes things complex. It pulls everything to complexity. If you use common sense and just think things through, where's my money going? Do I have control over it? Like, are the terms in my favor or not? Are they at least equal or not? Like, If you're starting to see like, I don't like where my money's flowing, most of it flows right out the door. My household makes a good amount of money. I feel like we should be more comfortable. If that resonates, you're probably right. It's just you have leaks in the boat. The money's flowing somewhere that's not in your control, or the money's flowing right out the door. There are ways you can capture that value. Insert becoming your own banker.
For sure. For sure. Well, if I had to paraphrase one of the aspects that I think you just laid out to answer my question about what folks need to consider is there are mechanical things that you could do to check for inefficiencies and such. And then because dollars tend to follow what we value, right? If you want to consider what you value, look where your money goes. And if you want to make an adjustment, then, well, do go through the mechanics, look at your numbers, okay, whether that's pulling up last month's credit card expenditures or just fill in the blank, right? And just see, well, does that reflect what I actually want to be doing, you know, value-wise and legacy-wise? And so go through the mechanics of it. But then I want to circle back to the mindset side of, I try to match stuff up, mechanics, mindset. That's how it occurred to me. Talk about the mindset in the average American home in a second. But let me mention this just while we're on the subtopic of loans, inefficient versus efficient loans. It was a few years ago. I mean, 5, 6 years ago, probably 7 years ago, something like that, where I was given what I thought was a helpful metric. Now, typically when it comes to, let's say, recapturing debt, if someone is going to use infinite banking for recapturing debt, like I did when I got started, there's certainly nothing wrong with going smallest to biggest. You know, whatever your smallest loan is, tackle that, get an early win. There's something to be said about the psychological, right? But I also know this, if there are some people out there that when they get on my calendar, they're the type of person that does go deeper than that, wants to go deeper than that, and they're saying, well, Jesse, what about this particular card or this particular debt because it's this?
Yes, I think I mean, that a lot of people will use the payment instead of how long. They'll say, if I take my payment of whatever it is, say $1,000, and I have a $10,000 debt, they'll say that equals a 10 or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then they create a scale to say how much leverage is the debt. So in other words, my payment is leveraged 10x. So that's probably a good thing. I'm just pulling numbers out of here. So
I'm using my
The problem-
calculator.
Yeah. The
I don't need to be
problem
doing
with
that stuff
approaching
that
it that way.
yeah, the problem with doing it that approach is you're ignoring so there's two problems there. The first is the volume of interest. That's what we're kind of solving for. So if the $1,000 payment is $999 of interest and 1% or $1 of principal, all we really care about for the efficiency to see how much of a drain it is on us is the interest portion of the payment. We want to take the interest portion and say, well, what is that doing to us? And one way to do that would say divide the interest portion to the payment. That'll give you the volume of interest you're paying per debt. A lot of people, this is like, if you're going to do this, it tends to be a sticker shock when you when you look at your mortgage.
Sure.
When you think you're paying 2%, which you technically are paying 2% of the balance of the mortgage. So if you have a $400,000 mortgage, it's 2% of that number every month. Not, I don't know where people think the 2% comes in otherwise. It's not like you're going to pay that amount over 30 years. You're paying 2% of that every single month. The principal due. But you divide that out, it's not uncommon to see 80, 85, 90% of the payment is going to interest.
Right. The volume instead of the rate, like you were saying. Yeah. Focusing on the volume.
Right.
And that's the point that I was trying to make about there's nothing wrong with finding the inefficient loans that you currently have if you're going to use infinite banking for recapturing debt and focusing on the inefficient ones first. You don't necessarily have to start with just the smallest and work up to the biggest.
Yes. I think if you're seeking to try and get the most bang for the buck, the person who's a little more granular will want to do some of those calculations. There are other things you can address though. For example, I mentioned terms. Are your terms more favorable with one of those debts over another? Is one of those debts compounding at an annual rate compared to a monthly rate? You want to get rid of the monthly before the annual. The monthly is more harmful to your household. So there's some other stuff you can look into to say which loans are actually toxic to the household. Even though they're all loans under the same umbrella, depending on the terms first for me, volume second, then you can go by rate. But that'll put you in a good spot. If you pay attention to those three things, you'll have a good order to get yourself out of paying the cash flow to other companies.
Interesting. You look at terms, then volume, then rate. Got you. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I meant that to actually just be a quick thing, and then I got lost out in the weeds when I started pulling out my calculator and trying to do numbers right here in the middle of a conversation. But let me go back to the mechanics versus the mindset. So people should be going through the mechanics and checking their numbers like you were talking about. What are your thoughts about the mindset of the average American? You know, where they're coming from, what their education has been like, what money conversations in their home have probably been like. And again, speak from your experience, client's experience. We're just having a conversation about the mindset around money and the American dream and wealth and legacy and all things, you know, that we've kind of touched on so far.
Yeah, I think so mindset, it all starts in the mind. I think most people's understanding of all money topics are someone else's opinions. Like most people don't go out and actually research it, or what they call research is not real actual research. So I think most people are hearing hearsay, Googling, TikTok, YouTube to get some bits of information. I think personally it's the elephant in the room, although it is woven into the entire fabric of society. Every time goods and services exchange, we're talking money. We're talking taxes, we're talking money, we're talking cash flow. Yet those topics are taboo for the average Americans. Not the top tier, upper echelon. Like those families openly discuss finances, openly discuss these topics. And a lot of them are used to it because they run companies, and companies have to get all of their numbers in order every quarter.
And make them public and share them.
And make them share them. Yep. Gotta, cross the T's, dot the I's. Everyone has to make sure we understand what's happening. So I think it's a different world when you're like me, you, sorry, I don't mean to assume, like me, the average American, like I didn't have those conversations growing up. It's taboo in the family. It's taboo in culture. It's taboo if you go to a church. It's taboo, like, oh God, love for money. No, don't talk about that. It's greedy. It's right up there with like politics. It's right up there with religion. People just shy away from it. And really, it's the elephant in the room. Because if everyone understood how money actually worked, wow, what a country would be. If they understood the point of it all was cash, the direction of the cash flow instead of the balance of the account, man, what a world we like. That is really tough for people to get past because everyone has been told, save this much and you'll be fine. Save an emergency of this magnitude and you're fine. Hit this number and you can retire. Like everything is balance oriented. I'm sorry, the most profitable entities in America in history are businesses. Do they spend all of their time obsessing over, I don't know, the book value No, they care about the bottom line, which is a fancy way of saying what happened. What's the net operating income? Revenue minus expenses. Those are cash flows. They focus entirely on cash flows, where the average American focuses on the balance sheet. Like, now why? If you look into accounting, this is really interesting, or I found it interesting anyway. What's the point of an asset, which is found on the balance sheet? Most people, I didn't know until I started looking into it. In the accounting world, you buy assets that will depreciate in value. They will be depleted, but their purpose is to generate revenue to pay expenses and leave a residual. So the point of the asset is to be spent to zero and go away. This is why companies focus entirely on cash flows, because the only thing that matters is I don't care what asset does it, I just need the cash flow. Whereas people, we focus so much on, my Roth IRA. I need that Roth IRA. I need a 401k. I need this balance. I need that balance. It's corporate finance versus personal finance. It's, the friendly environment versus the hostile environment. Yeah, that would be like, if you're looking at your assets or things that are labeled as assets on your balance sheet, be honest. What's the cash flow that they're generating? And do that over the past 5 years. So no one can say, well, I have $1 million in a savings account that's paying me 5%. Well, that's nice. It's only been a year of that. What has it done for the past decade? 3 pennies, maybe? Like, you have to be brutally honest to say, I have non-productive assets, non-performing, like that's normal terminology for debts, non-performing debts, which means someone's not paying. There's non-performing assets, meaning they're not generating income. Like most people, when they're looking at their balance sheet, it's like, oh wow, it's not spinning off income. I'm going to have to spend this down, which I think is a beautiful example we mentioned last time about the CD sisters. The CD sisters that used a CD, or we'll just say money market to make it a little easier, they had a balance. And when they got to retirement, they started spending the balance. They spent the interest and the part of the balance. And it only lasted about 5.5 years. Now, if you have something that's generating income to a level you need, that lasts in perpetuity. And you can pass that asset on. Totally different. It's the infinite gain versus the finite gain.
Mm-hmm.
It's a totally different mindset.
I think that's been one of my biggest takeaways from our recent conversations is your focus and emphasis on thinking like a corporation, thinking like a business versus the conventional personal finance that we're inundated with. So I'm saying that so that you'll know that. And it lines up with what Nelson says in the book, which is that everybody should be in another business, which is the banking business. So, I think there's a swath of the average Americans that are employees. They're in these homes being told these conventional things like I was, like you were, and they're, starting a career and they're locking up their money in these conventional plans. And then they're turning around and being beholden to the banks for their personal finance. They're not thinking like a business. They're not thinking like a corporation. And those employees, they earn, and that was me. I was a teacher. I was a law enforcement officer. I mean, those are staple employee careers and fields, right? You got a very set plan there. Yeah. Hey, you work here for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And there's this state retirement and all this different stuff. That's your typical trajectory. And people at work, though, so this is what I'm trying to bring to bear for the employees that are listening. People at work is only one way to make money. A brand new space, a brand new industry, a brand new way that you could be more efficient is just by becoming your own banker. You're now in a new space. you can exponentially increase what you can do because now you've got money at work. And if you start keeping more of the money that used to go to the other people, and you have the benefits of having a tailwind, right? And your money's compounding, the premiums that you're paying into your policies, et cetera, you start getting all of that going to, like, because I don't believe that everybody should be the same. Like, not everybody should be a business owner. Not everybody should be an employee. And I think people figure out who they are. You know, everybody has their gifts and their abilities and their skills and talents and such. So what I'm saying is, for the employees, be the best in your career. You can still pursue that ladder the way that you want to, but when it comes to finance, be thinking like a business owner, like you're saying, Joe. Begin considering or implement being your own banker. That way you can get money to work. And then, of course, now we can talk about small business owners as well. But any more thoughts there about employees, the average American, going through the mechanics of looking at your numbers, things along that line?
Well, I was going to ask you, you said you were a teacher. My experience is most teachers have this wonderful thing called a pension. And most of the teachers I've run across, I should say very few, also contribute to their retirement plan. They bank on the pension being their retirement.
Right.
Right. And ironically, you take a step back, a pension is an actuarial contract. It's an annuity. It generates cash flow. No one cares what the balance is. They care about what the benefit is, AKA what's the cash flow that I'm going to receive every year. Ironically, given the choice in the most purest environment, everyone gravitates to cash flow. They instinctively know something about receiving X amount for my whole life, regardless, is better than a balance that can go up and down and can go around and can get depleted. And to me, it's interesting that, like, for example, that's an actuarial product. Life insurance is an actuarial product. It's the only way you can guarantee the income will last your entire life because of that science. Whereas the balance approach, the retirement account, is using something called modern portfolio theory and the efficient market hypothesis. Theory, hypothesis, science. Which
I see the contrast.
Pick one, right?
I see the contrast.
Which one? I mean, if we want certainty, which direction do we want to go? We want to be in this actuarial science. That needs to be the foundation.
Right.
And you can, like, if you want to get super nerdy on this, you can go and look. Wade Fowle puts out studies all the time, retirement income. He did a big one not too long ago about the use of life insurance and annuities to support, like, an investment type portfolio, retirement plan portfolio, to increase the spendability of the dollars throughout one's life and enhance the legacy for the next generation. There's another one by Ernst and Young, where they also prove the same thing. They come to the same conclusion. If you add actuarial science as the foundational elements, it enhances both the legacy and the spendability of the dollars. What they do not say is the balance will be higher. Counterintuitive to people. They're going to look at it and say, but my account doesn't say it's as high as it otherwise would be if it was compounding at the 7, 8, 9, 10, or 12%. Like, the balance isn't the key, right? The cash flow is the key. If you can get your mind around the cash flow and you can learn to look at things with a discerning eye to say, how can I transform this cash outflow to a cash inflow? You got your mind in a spot, your neuroplasticity is high enough, you're open-minded enough to say, I'm ready for this concept.
Yeah. My only pushback now, knowing what I know now, looking back at what I had as a teacher, is that while I can appreciate the difference between hypothesis over here and actuarial science over here, is that it was obligatory. I don't appreciate now that significant percentage was pulled out of the income that I would have liked to have used then at that time to voluntarily decide. You see what I'm saying there? To be able to voluntarily decide, well, I do want to do this out in the actuarial space with something that I privately picked for myself instead of the government trying to tell me, well, no, we're going to take this. That whole idea of government thinking that they can better provide for us or that they're more interested in our results than we should be is absurd to me.
So that's a great point. Let's take that a step further. Mandatory contributions or mandatory withdrawals from your account to support this actuarial product. Is that a bad thing? Now, there's another structure you can use where it's not mandatory. But let's take a moment. If you think about life insurance, one of the reasons they are one of, if I guess, the best risk managers in the world as an industry is because they have guaranteed infusion of money every single month, every quarter, every year. The requirement to pay a premium fortifies the very business and infrastructure we need to do the thing that we want. That is banking. So because the insurance company can guarantee money is going to come in, they can think differently, similar to someone who's receiving a pension. They can think differently in retirement. They could spend it to zero and be fine because next month there's another X amount. There's a lot less pressure when there's a guaranteed infusion coming every single month. That persistent infusion of capital into the insurance chassis framework is what allows them to guarantee all the benefits and declare all the dividends and so on and so forth. So although I see what you're saying from a personal standpoint, it kind of stinks to have your hard-earned money it feels like taken, deferred, and postponed until retirement, so you can't spend it today, which is the same problem I mentioned about the retirement plan framework. If you take the approach of a business owner and say, if I owned an insurance company, yes, I want the premiums required, because that gives me a certain predictability, a certain consistency of money, of revenues that I can put to work at like clockwork. So I know I can generate what I need to generate for future benefits.
Right. I would just make the argument that I would rather be in the position of being a private individual who's voluntarily contracting to do that with, say, a mutual life insurance company, rather than the state of North Carolina, who I might not have as great of, trust in for looking. Yeah. I get it. It's more of a philosophical conversation. But that's the way that I lean now. I want the choice. I want the right to choose that relationship for myself and not just have it automatically performed upon me by the state because I happen to be in that line of work, if that makes sense.
So one might say you want control.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. All right. So let me tell you about one thing that's crossed my mind during this conversation, talking about the average American, the American dream, employees, business owners, all this kind of stuff. It's inspiring to me, and it's also a bit aggravating at the same time. Not a bit aggravating, very aggravating to see an immigrant come into the U.S. with nothing in their pockets, but just have a belief, in their own work ethic and in the opportunity that's here for them. And I've listened to so many great stories about people launching businesses, right? And just hearing about their conversations and their family dynamics and how different that is from folks that are born here. And we can so easily take things for granted. And that's not just an American thing. That's a human thing, right? To take things for granted and whatnot. But I'm just saying, right, that it's both inspiring to hear someone's success story about coming here with nothing, launching a profitable business, doing great for themselves and their family, etc. And then, living, to bring it home in a small town where, I live in a pretty rural place in North Carolina where local folks very often don't get to stay where we grew up because we've got to go to the next county or next state or whatever over to be able to get a job or to be able to have more opportunities, etc. And again, I go back to that conversation that I had with that grandmother today, who her grandmother was still alive and she's also a grandmother. And just imagine, Joe, if mine and your grandparents were the ones that had happened upon. So, I believe that we have things come to us when they do. Okay. So I'm very grateful for so many things, right? I'm not trying to say that I'm not grateful, but it's an inspiring thing to think, what if our grandparents were the ones that found infinite banking and we were the grandchildren that had gotten policies started on us? And we did have a very different family dynamic, business, work, money dynamic because of what. So I don't mind being the one that starts it. I know you don't mind being the one that starts this trajectory and whatnot. But that's what I'm looking to facilitate, right? Is in my own life and with folks like that prospective client that I was speaking with today. Yes, let's be the ones that start something right now that affects our grandparents or parents' lives as well as our own, if they're here with us. But we're also setting these next generations up where they just walk in on a full American dream that they can just scale, that they can spread that out and impact other people's lives. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm saying a lot right here, but that's the inspiring and aggravating part. That's the dichotomy of seeing somebody like an immigrant come here with nothing and create something beautiful, and right?
Man, I love that. The last part about someone stepping in, future generations stepping into the American dream, fully realized, and simply adding scale for the future generations of, that is a beautiful thought. Along the lines of your conversation with the grandmother and the man. I To me, it went the other direction. When I see something like that about speaking to like the American public, maybe taking this for granted, the opportunities for granted, not thriving the way they can. It's sad to me. It's sad when I see Americans that lost hope. Um, it's sad to hear when people think it's against them. Like, I don't know. I feel like so many people don't understand how money works. And okay, we just came up with this little calculation to figure out is debt toxic or not? To the degree it's toxic, you want it out of your family's life. Well, you can say the same thing for how you earn income, right? You can say, for example, W-2, you're going to find is one of the harshest treated income, for better or worse.
Jim Rohn said profits are better than wages. That's who I heard it from anyway. Jim Rohn, profits are better than wages.
I learned it from Kiyosaki.
Okay.
Right, his quadrants, where he was talking about an employee compared to small business sole proprietor, big business compared to investor. And he walked through a tax situation of each person. And it was like, why isn't that taught before people make the decision of what they want to do for the rest of their life?
Because it's not good for the machine, Joe. It's not good for the machine. It's not good for the matrix, Joe.
So
we need the people. We need the people plugged in.
That's just it. It's infuriating to be like, oh, maybe you want to be an educator, so you can own a private chartered school to do like you would approach what your passion is differently if you knew the steps you were taking and you arranged your affairs in such a manner that put you in control. You could still do the thing you love. You just don't have to do it the matrix way. Because the matrix is just going to crush your creativity, smash you into a box and say, this is it. Take it or leave it, or you got to move to the next town over. And it's like, man, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
If they come for me, I mean, you're the one quoting the agents come for me.
Oh, I was on a conversation the other day with somebody, and I haven't released it yet. It'll come up soon. My friend Liz, and we get to talking about government or whatever at one point, and she said, "Well, I'm on the list now." And I was like, "That's okay. My name was already there, I'm sure."
I willingly put myself. They have all my fingerprint. They have retinal scans. They have every test I've taken. They know everything about me.
Right.
Goodness. I did want to. I was going to share this. If I can find it, this little passage. It's from the book "Heads I Win, Tails You Lose." I think that was the book I was quoting to you.
Yeah, you were telling me about it.
Um, yeah, I'll just read this little excerpt if that's okay with you. This is just introduction. Right out of the gate, Americans are losing the game of money. So that was I was talking about strategically stacking odds in your favor. Everyone ultimately wants financial freedom, and the reassuring part of this is the tail end of this. Regardless of your present circumstances, you can end up on top no matter what to live the American dream. Like
Awesome.
that is hopeful. That is inspiring. That's like, how do we do that? Live the American dream. However you, person listening, want to define that. I'm not talking dollars and cents. I'm not talking number of houses you own. You get to define it.
Yep. Go back to
But
your
the
screen,
beauty
Joe.
is if
Go
you,
back to your screen. I want to see your face again now that you're speaking hope to me, so I want to see your face again. Thanks for putting that up there.
all right.
Tell them, Joe. I'm amening you now.
It's just like it screams hope. It screams inspiration. It screams like empowerment. The American dream is what you define it. And using this platform, it is a platform to launch everything you want to do from. If you think of it that way, and you think of your cash flows, cash in feeds the platform, and if you can transfer the cash outflows back to cash inflows to feed the platform, the only thing that happens is your platform keeps getting bigger. And that means you can keep doing really cool stuff by your definition and not have to ask permission. It's completely private. No one gets in the way. You do what you want to do. That's that's a pretty cool message. Um, he goes on. It gets a little bit. He taps into the Americans are losing the game of money. He's really like hitting on. We've really given away the responsibility. We've given away self-reliance, entrepreneurship. We've given away, you know, safety and like freedom for security. We've given, and there's a price to that. We're paying the price now. The education system is set up like there's inputs and there's outputs. We set up the inputs and this is the output. The education stinks. It doesn't address money at all. It barely addresses world wars now. It doesn't even address communism now. It's like the monetary fiscal, oh my gosh, the stewardship, the failure in stewardship over that for our country, the debt at a crazy astronomically high number, such that the interest on the debt is more than it costs to fund the military.
It's preposterous.
That is mind-blowingly large. The general lack of education that like he goes on. He lists several things.
Let me
It's
ask you
just like,
something. Just because you and I go back and forth about books and stuff, you're reading this, I'm reading that. Have you ever heard of John Taylor Gatto? John Taylor Gatto. He coined this term of unschooling. So he was a state teacher of the year in New York. Very well known career teacher. He was decades in teaching. Okay. And he wrote many books, and you can find YouTube clips of him online, but he wrote one that I love. It's called Dumbing Us Down. And he just had a really interesting approach to unschooling. So maybe that'll be of interest to you at some point. Okay. I mean, cause we homeschool our kids, even as a former public school teacher, I actually say government school teacher now that I know better. I don't even normally say public school teacher. I say government school teacher. yeah, we decided that, in that aspect of life as well, we wanted more control, and we figured that it would lead to more profits, right? In the family life, in our lifestyle, being able to, do more together. And okay, all right, I'll stop right there. That's okay. Yeah, education. I'm with you.
And that's so this goes into like Diego Monte man, I forget the guy from the Princess Bride, but he says
Inigo
you keep
Montoya.
using Montoya.
Is it? My
I
name
think
is
that's it.
Inigo. You killed my
Yeah.
father. Prepare to die.
You keep saying that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Okay.
man, so that applies to like my little saving, investing. It applies to education. It applies like they have commandeered these terms and changed the meaning of the terms. Like education in its truest sense is absolutely beautiful. To take someone's mind and bring them through this enlightening staircase so they can self-discover and learn, truly learn, to draw that out of somebody. Amazing. It's incredibly rewarding. Now think of the government school system. Is that what's happening?
Right.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's where
Um,
the example jumps in my mind of, I mean, could you imagine somebody like a Beethoven who obviously needed to be bringing music to the world the way that he did? Could you imagine him being force fed trigonometry, or just, just insert whatever because it's just some arbitrary decision by somebody else when he obviously needs to be bringing music, or Michelangelo in art, or just, you get the exact example that I'm trying to describe by using some real clear, persons. But I believe that that's true about everybody. Everybody's got their skills. I believe it's biblical. Their gifts would be the word there, that they need to be bringing to bear, both for their own good, the good of the marketplace, the good of America, if we're talking just about our country, their family, their community, instead of being, like you said earlier, being put in a box, being forced down in the box.
and it's if you trace back, I don't know how down the rabbit hole you want to go here, but if you trace back the government school model where that came from, it was taken. It was I think it's now I got the country's escaping my mind, but it was designed to take people, regular people, and create soldiers. If you think about what that means, what is a soldier? It's like an instrument of war. It doesn't think, it just does.
Takes orders.
It takes orders from the next higher up soldier. As we
Told
learned,
when you can have days off, told when you can go pee, told where to go, told what to do.
like, so they had to crush the human spirit, crush thought, crush creativity, and create this factory output.
Right.
It's
Now, all
predictably
my military clients, don't get mad, okay? Y'all know,
no,
you've heard
no.
from me that I've got more and more respect for the freedoms, and that's mine and Joe's point here, is the freedoms that we do get to enjoy here in America. Yeah. Nothing like it. I've got the utmost respect, as a husband and father, and just in America. And I got more and more respect over time, Joe, for what we enjoy. And it's because of people that have committed their lives to the service of America. So I'm with you, but I wanted to say that while it crossed my mind too.
I appreciate that. And definitely I'm not disparaging at all. I'm just saying the model,
we're talking about the
framework,
education. Yeah.
the framework was we need a predictable output and we have a variable input. What do we do to take a variable input to create a predictable output? Stuff happens and the carbon copy comes out.
Some automaton.
Right. They took that model and said, we're going to use that for school. The people that brought it to America first did it in the Industrial Revolution because they needed predictable factory workers, not people thinking of how to start a business, not exploring their passions, not It was variable input. Something's got to happen for 4 years, and they've got to come out doing what they're told. Like, man, that's not education. That is not like go back to Plato and the Roman Empire and like that's not what education was. The genius that was, I mean, man, even the way they spoke and wrote, and it was beautiful. It was eloquent. You look at some of the songs on the radio, man. Not trying to disparage musicians either. I'm not making a lot of enemies
No,
today.
right, right.
No, you're right. Who was it I was talking with the other day about, some of the next books that I was considering reading to our children are the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid and some real classics. Like you talking about the Roman Empire and stuff made me think about that. Some real classics. Yeah, the language in there is so good for sure. All right, so it's here. I'll jump in on that note now, just because we're getting real broad in our conversation. I love it. I'm here for all of it. The government and education and infinite banking and reading to our children is one of my supreme joys. And to me, that's a big part of the American dream. That's a big part of the American dream for us to be able to, intentionally spend time together doing something that, I enjoy, they enjoy. It's, I don't know. It's one of I'm real big on bookends, Joe. Starting my day a certain way with certain things that I do and whatnot, and then ending my day with a certain set of things that I do, and that reading is one of them for me.
Reading with the kids, you're saying?
Yep, reading with my children. Yep.
Love it.
Yep.
I think that's a great segue back, because if you know anything about Nelson Nash, well read. He a ferocious reader. He would read every day.
I've definitely not read all of his suggested readings in the back of Becoming Your Own Banker. Not even yet. I've read a bunch, but I've not read all of them. Yes.
Man. And like for him to even have the yes. There's a quote by Henry Ford. It's if money is your hope for independence, you will never have it. The only real security that a man will have in this world is a reserve of knowledge, experience, and ability.
I don't think I've ever heard that one. I like it.
It's like that's Nelson was saying, start in the mind. Start with rethinking your thinking. Start with its imagination. One of the beautiful examples that he gave for imagination was a math problem was given to a group of boys that were rowdy, right? And he was like, add up all the numbers from 1 to 100. And all the boys except one just they start going to it. 1 + 2 + 3 plus. And this kid's just like daydreaming out the window and writes something down and continues daydreaming. And the teacher's like, what the heck is this kid doing? Sure enough, he had it right. And he's like, how did you do that? And he's like, well, I envisioned a number line, and then I bent it in half, and then I added up. So 1 + 50 is 51. And I noticed they were all the same. So then I multiplied them by 50, and I got 50/50 was the answer. And and the teacher was like, immediately put him in like a advanced math class or something to that effect. But like one of the gems you can get from that is one, you're given a problem. Nobody else questioned the problem. They just routinely went into remember the education thing we just did. What am I supposed to do? Received order, do order. And they just started doing it with no imagination. He examined the problem. The problem was designed to waste their time so the teacher could do something. We have a lot of problems in our world that aren't really problems. They're just waste of time. Like if you take a minute and examine what needs to actually happen and what's the simplest way to make that happen, your life gets so simple and you can get back to what you actually wanted to do. which for him was daydreaming out the window. But man, it all starts in the mind. And one way to improve that is all this reading. So I love that you're reading with your children every day. I hope they carry on for the rest of their life doing that. It's like lost. People don't read anymore. And I hope you have hard books, not like a Kindle or some crap like that.
Oh man, I'm a hard copy guy. Yeah, no, I've got a library. That's one of my big things that I've also gotten from Jim Rohn. I know I've mentioned him once already today, and he would talk about the things that you can leave behind are photographs. Things that you can leave behind are, journals that you wrote in where they could hear or read and understand your thought process and your takeaways and what impacted you in your life. And then a third one that he mentions is your library, them getting to see what impacted you or what. So yeah, that's been an intentional thing that I've done for years and years now. Is I was buying books and writing on the inside of the books. Now I get to where I write on the inside of the books and I'll say, me and Lauren and Jacob and Josiah and Lana, we read this in year 2024. And, and then maybe I'll put down a few of our favorite quotes or lines from that book. Yeah, for sure. For sure. We're doing that.
Well,
May I share?
yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm doing something similar. Now I have it on my computer right now, just because it's a little easier with all the traveling I do. But one day when let's see, hold on, that didn't show up. Give me one sec. There we go. One day I'm going to reprint Nelson's book privately. This isn't for public distribution, but for my future generations here. It'll have all my notes. Like here are those notes from the
Awesome.
like the highlights. I got my thoughts that I was going through.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to share that because it adds a lot of context to the book that otherwise it's going to take you, what did I say, 4 or 5 times? You got to read the book over a 10-year
Right.
period.
You got to read the book 4 or 5 times. You got to go and buy yourself a snowboard. You got
to love it. Love it.
Had to tie it in there. Got to keep a trend going. If you want to, Joe, on your notes right there, you could type in something about a snowboard. That'll help your kids out and their grandkids out. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I'll throw that in there. Throw that example of what not to do.
Well, so imagination. If I gave my part of recapping this conversation and encouragement to people, it would be, folks that are listening in on conversations like this, they're already using their imagination. And my hope as well is that me, you, everybody listening, we do continue to question everything. We do continue to educate ourselves by reading and having quality conversations like this and consider how we could level up in our own lives, lead by example, but also set the bar higher for the next generation and encourage them to be doing the same. About the reading, my expectation is that I'll have opportunities to read to my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, but I also hope that at the same time, my children are just chomping at the bit, ready to get in there and be the ones reading to my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and on down the line. So when it comes to imagination, the fact is that you can be your own banker. And imagination is one of those first aspects of even considering the idea. So for folks that haven't implemented it yet, that's my encouragement is, okay, well, you have an opportunity to read the book called Becoming Your Own Banker. You have an opportunity to get in touch with, me or Joe or watch, online about infinite banking in a way that I wasn't able to 10 years ago and all that kind of stuff. Because the American dream is alive and well, and it's possible in a way that I don't even think could have been conceived. Well, I know it couldn't have, because Nelson didn't even come up with, the whole concept until he did. But here we are now, right? And I believe that to whom much is given, much is required, right? So now that we do know, I feel it as a great obligation and a purpose to be able to share that with everybody. So that's also my way of saying thanks, Joe. I mean, I love having these conversations with you, man. So I'll let you wrap this one up. What are your final thoughts?
I liked how we were talking legacy, and I liked how we were talking about reading. I
Hmm.
added a principle to in my notes. It's not an official principle of Nelson Nash, but I think it's thematic in everything he was putting together, and that's share the blueprint. It kind of speaks to both of those things. So once you start studying this, and I hope your learning curve is 10 times shorter than mine, 1,000 times shorter than mine. You get it the first read, the first page. And when you get to that point, when you have that epiphany, my hope is that you have a way to transfer that to the next generation. Read the book with them, journey with them, let them stumble through the examples, and let the book challenge their conventional mindset that they're bringing, the biases they're bringing to the table. And my hope is that book and you can be iron sharpening iron, getting rid of the impurities so that when they're done, your future generation has that pure understanding of this concept. Because remember, although we talk about life insurance right now, there might be a point in the future where life insurance is not the ideal way to do this, to build this platform. It is right now. It has been for a very, very, very long time, but there might be something better in the future. The process will remain the same though. So once you get your head wrapped around the process and to share that generationally, you can't even add up the quote unquote rate of return of transferring that knowledge along with the capital from generation to generation as it scales. It's mind blowing what can be done. So simple and what can be done.
Yep, man. I appreciate you, Joe. I'm gonna have to get back up with you for whatever we're doing next, whenever we're doing it next. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Well, that was an absolute pleasure for me to have Joe back on the podcast. We'll be having him back on again. If you have any questions for me or Joe, you could put that down in the comment section below, and we will see those. We can respond to those. And if you'd like to connect with us, our contact information will be in the show notes. But I hope that this has been as much of a pleasure for you as it has been for me. My encouragement is that you learn to live and leave lasting legacy. Have a great day. Take care.